Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jamie Lavin, and I lead the local infrastructure hub on behalf of Bloomberg Philanthropies. On behalf of Mike Bloomberg and Jim Anderson, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session. This session is brought to you by our amazing partners at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Results for America as part of the Local Infrastructure Hub, where we are providing technical assistance and information on IJA and IRA infrastructure funding opportunities for cities. We're going to dig into the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program, which provides $5 billion in grants to develop and implement ambitious plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollution. 46 states and over 75 metropolitan areas have received CPRG planning grants to date and will soon be submitting their Priority Climate Action Plans, otherwise known as PCAPs, in the lead up to implementation. So today we have a great lineup of speakers to discuss how cities can partner with grantees as they develop these plans. First, I'm pleased to welcome Peter Hansel, who is the Special Advisor for Implementation at the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you for joining us, Peter. The Zoom is yours.
Well, thank you, Jamie. And thanks to the Local Infrastructure Hub for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here to discuss the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program. As Jamie mentioned, this program was established under the Inflation Reduction Act to provide grants to states, local governments, tribes, and territories to plan for and implement measures that cut greenhouse gas emissions. You can go to the next slide, Jamie. So just a couple months ago, on September 20th, EPA announced this general competition for a total of $4.3 billion in grants to help these states, local governments, tribes, and territories to implement measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'll note that on the same day, we also announced the availability of $300 million in a separate competition that is only open to tribes and territories. But I know that we don't have any tribes and territories necessarily on this call, so I'll skip that for today's discussion. So I'll really only focus on the general competition, which is that $4.3 billion competitive grant competition for states, local governments, tribes, and territories to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Both of these announcements build on the $250 million in climate action plan that, again, Jamie mentioned, that we've already awarded to these same entities to help them plan for climate change reducing measures. And we announced that earlier this year. But I will get to this in a minute, but there's an important linkage between those planning grants and the implementation grants that are currently out for submissions. Next slide, please. So the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program kind of says it all in the title, but we have designed the CPRG program to meet these overarching objectives. The first being to achieve significant cumulative greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030. A second, to provide substantial benefits to communities, including a focus on low-income and disadvantaged communities. Third goal of the CPRG program is to ensure that we are complementing other funding sources from the Inflation Reduction Act and elsewhere to ensure that we are maximizing the greenhouse gas reduction benefits that can come from the CPRG. And finally, we want to ensure that the CPRG helps pursue innovative policies and programs that can scale, opening opportunities for even greater emissions reductions. So I should probably have started with this, but we already have a lot of materials available on the EPA website about the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program, including the notice of funding opportunities, the notices of funding opportunities for the general competition and the tribes and territories only competition. We've also done a series of webinars that explained what is in the NOFO. Everything that I'm presenting here is consistent with what I've already presented or what EPA has already presented in those webinars. And so if you want more information, please check those out. Check out the materials online. I just want to give a little bit of a taste of what is in this notice of funding opportunity. Next slide, please. Great. So the CPRG program is really designed to be broad. As I mentioned, at its core, it's really about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and confronting climate change will require progress from all of these sectors listed on this slide. So applications may focus on any of these main sectors that emit greenhouse gases or that remove carbon from the atmosphere. And we expect to see that a diversity of applications reflecting the differences in the economies and expertise and priorities across all the states, cities, and tribes that are looking to apply. We can go to the next slide. One back, actually. Oh, okay, maybe that's it. So applicants may include more than one greenhouse gas emission reduction measure in their application, covering one or more of those sectors that I had on the previous slide. You'll see this in the NOFO, but EPA has established 5 funding tiers for potential awards, as shown in this table. So states, municipalities, tribes, and territories, or coalitions thereof, may apply for grants ranging from $2 million all the way up to $500 million. And we have set these tiers such that we are providing opportunities for a wide range of applicants. We acknowledge that may be mid-sized cities, large cities, states, small states, big states, that are looking to, and coalitions, which, small coalitions, large coalitions, that are looking to enact measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that may come in different sizes and flavors. So that's why we have this range and tiers of grant sizes that we are offering. This really reflects the different scope, scale, and cost of these various reduction measures. In total, we anticipate awarding about 30 to 115 grants, and applicants can apply in any tier. So on this next slide, so who can apply and for what measures? Well, measures can focus on any sector, as I discussed previously, but there are some restrictions on what qualifies. As I mentioned, there's this linkage to the planning grants. So the planning grants, applicants are required to develop, for the planning grants, the planning grant recipients are required to develop a priority climate action plan, or PCAP, that is going to be developed under the planning grants. And those PCAPs must be submitted to EPA by March 1st in order to be able to be eligible for the general competition. So applicants for this competition could be the lead organizations that receive that planning grant and are responsible for developing the priority climate action plan, or, and I think this is important for a lot of the participants on this call, it could be other eligible applicants that did not receive a planning grant. So just because you didn't receive a planning grant, you may still be eligible to apply for the implementation grant. So that's an important point. And let me give you a more specific example. So an eligible applicant that did not receive a planning grant may apply for an implementation grant if they are in the geographic area covered by a PCAP and they are applying to implement a greenhouse gas reduction measure or multiple measures included in that priority climate action plan. So say a state received a planning grant and includes in its PCAP, its Priority Climate Action Plan, a greenhouse gas reduction measure to reduce, say, transportation-related emissions by expanding alternative modes of transportation in localities in that state. And the state coordinated with local governments across the state to design that measure. A city located in that state may apply for an implementation grant to implement the measure since it is covered by the state PCAP. So given these links between the eligible applicants that received and did not receive a planning grant, we really want to stress the importance of coordination and communication between the planning grant recipients and these other eligible applicants. And that needs to go both ways, both between the lead organizations that receive the planning grant and those that are looking to apply. They should be coordinating with those planning grantees to ensure that the measures that they are interested in implementing are reflected in that Priority Climate Action Plan. Next slide, please. You might be asking, how do you know who received a planning grant? Who should I be coordinating with? So EPA has already awarded these planning grants. There's a map on the EPA website with a complete list of all the planning grants. EPA has also provided a list of points of contacts for a lot of these planning grants. That's available on the CPRG website. But you can see we've already awarded these grants to 46 states, 79 metropolitan statistical areas, 4 territories, and 9 tribes. The 4 states that are not highlighted, Kentucky, Florida, Iowa, South Dakota, they did not accept the planning grant funds, and therefore most municipalities from those 4 states are not eligible to apply. However, if you are a MSA, if you are a municipality covered by an MSA in those states, you are eligible to apply. And so I'll get to that in a sec. Next slide. So again, eligible applicants for these grants are really governmental organizations, states or territorial agencies, municipalities, air pollution control agencies, tribes and tribal consortia, or coalitions thereof. You may either apply as an individual applicant or a coalition. There's some restrictions on that. I know I want to be sure, I'm a little short on time, so I'll just keep going, but please review the application materials if you're interested in applying as an individual applicant or a coalition. You can submit an additional application if you're interested in applying as a coalition. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's who's eligible to apply really at the municipal level. And I know that that's a lot of the folks on this call, so I want to spend some time talking about that. The Clean Air Act defines municipality as a city, town, borough, county, parish, district, or other public body created by or pursuant to state law. So eligible applicants include, again, the lead organizations for the Metropolitan Statistical Area planning grants, those MSAs that received a planning grant, or other municipalities or municipal agencies or departments within those MSAs that were not the lead organization for the planning grant, or other municipalities in a state that received a planning grant. So there are municipalities outside of those those 79 participating MSAs are eligible if they're in one of the states and territories that opted into the planning grant phase of the program, and that state and territory develops a priority climate action plan. Again, municipality is a city, town, borough, county, parish, district, or other public body. We updated the NOFO this week where we clarified the expectations for these other public bodies. So these other public bodies may be entities such as a regional transit authority, public housing authority, a port authority, water, sanitation, waste district, public school district, a flood authority. They may be eligible municipal entities to apply for the CPRG implementation grants, but the NOFO clarifies that these other public bodies must provide documented proof that the state or territory in which they are in considers it to be a public body created by or pursuant to state law, and that they are accountable to municipal or state units of government. Councils of government, so these regional organizations comprised of multiple municipalities, such as council of government, metropolitan planning organizations, are also eligible if they meet these criteria that I just discussed. Just real quick on the entities that are in Kentucky, Florida, Iowa, and South Dakota, there are 12 MSAs that are eligible to apply for implementation grant funds. Municipalities covered by the PCAPs developed by those 12 MSAs in those states are eligible to apply. But municipalities outside of those areas in those 4 states are not eligible unless they are covered by another PCAP. Next slide. So again, I'll skip past this, but states, tribes, and territories are also eligible to apply. Here are the list of eligible entities from these states. I don't know anyone's on this call that are from these entities, but we can go to the next slide. Okay, so last slide, and then I'll wrap it up here. These are just the important dates to keep in mind. We released a notice of funding opportunity on September 20th. Application period will close on April 1st. So applicants have from September 20th to April 1st to apply. As I noted earlier, implementation grants must implement measures contained in a priority climate action plan. So the priority climate action plans that are currently being developed, those need to be completed first. And for this competition, those PCAPs are due March 1st, 2024. And from there, whatever's in those PCAPs can be folded into an application by the eligible entities. So we encourage all of these eligible applicants to collaborate and coordinate now on the development of the PCAPs to ensure that their priorities are reflected in those climate action plans. Finally, after receiving the applications on April 1st, we intend to announce the awards in July 2024 and award the funds by October. Finally, we do request that potential applicants submit a notice of intent to apply by February 1st. And this is optional, but we strongly request it. And this is to really help ensure that EPA is preparing for the applications that we are going to receive, and helps ensure that we have the resources in place to really follow through with this grant program in a timely manner. So notice of intent to apply by February 1st is a request. This is just a taste. There's a lot more information in the NOFO, but really wanted to focus this discussion today on the opportunities for these eligible entities, particularly municipalities that may have received a planning grant or may not have received a planning grant and are looking to apply for the CPRG implementation grants. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think your hypothetical, especially sort of being able to lay out how it works for a municipality that may not be the lead in an MSA to be able to figure out whether the kind of activity that they want to do is eligible and covered by a PCAP either in their state or in their MSA. So one of the first questions we received was about clean hydrogen facilities and whether those are considered to be an eligible use of or greenhouse gas reduction activity within the guidance, and specifically if the use of hydrogen for electric use from our local electric cooperative.
So I think I would point the question to or the person asking the question to the NOFO, and well, first, a reminder that the eligible applicants for this program are states, municipalities, these sorts of public bodies at the state and local level and tribes and territories to implement greenhouse gas reduction measures. And by measures, we mean policies, programs, projects that those eligible entities can implement. So like for-profit companies are not eligible entities to apply. Now, we talk about this in our question and answers document on the NOFO website, but there are maybe some opportunities for private entities to receive a sub-grant from a grantee, an eventual grantee, to enact a portion of the measure that they've received funding to do. And then finally, I'll just say, the CPRG program is broad, and it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a number of different policies and measures that could fall into that. And we've provided a sample list of that in our NOFO. I think there's 44 different, hypothetical measures that we could imagine. That is by no means an exhaustive list of all of the types of things that could fall under, that could get funded, but it maybe helps helps folks picture kind of what we mean by greenhouse gas reduction measures. I'll also just note that in the evaluation criteria, there is, and I mentioned it as kind of overarching priority, but there is a expectation that the applications are making a case to us that the funds that they need are additional relative to all of the other funds that are currently available for any of these projects. So I'll just leave it there. Hopefully that was helpful response. Yeah.
Very helpful. I'm going to pull one of your slides back on screen because we're getting a bunch of questions about the tiers and the specific, how many implementation or how many grants will be awarded per MSA. So the question, one of the questions we got was, can you explain more about the funding tiers? And then another one that I'll just layer into that is, what does it mean that only 2 grants will be awarded in MSA? Maybe you can walk through that a little bit more.
Sure. And I'd point people to our question and answer document where we do talk about this in greater detail. So the applications will be evaluated within each tier, and so we have presented here the targeted amounts of funds that we intend to reserve for each of these tiers. And again, the reason why we set these tiers was to try to promote applicants to right-size their application based on their ability to implement and deliver on the grant, and to recognize the differences in the capacities and sizes of the potential applicants and grantees. We intend to award no more than 2 grants at the same level within a given jurisdiction. So this is intended to ensure that we are getting appropriate diversity in the grants that we are awarding. And we provided an example of this in the question and answer document. Multiple entities, any number of entities, separate entities can apply from a state or an MSA if they're eligible. But we will only award 2 to any given entities, to any municipality or to any given state entity. So say a state Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Energy, the same state, they submit separate applications. They could both get awarded at the state level, but we would not award further grants at the state level. The same applies to that at a municipal level. However, municipalities within that same state could get awarded a grant in addition to the state level entities getting awarded a grant. Does that make sense?
Does, I think. People
and again, I think there's a more coherent example of this in the question and answer document, and I can try to find that.
I've included it in the chat. So,
okay,
so we've put
great.
the NOFO and the guidance, the maps, everything's in the chat. So hopefully people will check those out after. There's been a number of questions, people doing their homework and trying to figure out how to figure out the state context and what was awarded in the state, and then also what MSAs when they're state, especially for those states that aren't participating, if they have MSAs. So I'm glad for those questions, and we've put the links in the chat. Are there any other, I think we've covered the questions we've gotten so far. Are there any other questions before we say goodbye to Peter and thank him for his service and for joining us here today? You can raise your hand if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll thank Peter, and we look forward to checking in again as this process moves along. We know that it's a new program, and with new programs, there's a lot of questions, also a lot of excitement, and so I anticipate calling EPA back and asking to join as we get a little closer to those upcoming deadlines. And thank you, Peter. Next,
thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Julia Peak. Julia is one of our fantastic partners on the local infrastructure hub, who is the Director of Communications and Mobilization at the Urban Sustainability Director Network. In this role, she oversees federal engagement and supports members in navigating the federal funding landscape and applying for grants. And for those of you who are in our current Climate Action Bootcamp, you probably recognize Julia because she is our subject matter expert on CPRJ's, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. And she's here today to help us understand this process and get a little deeper after hearing from the federal government about the opportunity. So I will turn it over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Jamie. Hey, everybody. It's great to see you all. I recognize some names and some of you are new. So, hey, it's great to meet you. I live in Seattle. And I'm going to dig in just a little bit more on a couple of these pieces, more from the MSA perspective. So USDN has been working with several awesome partners to provide some assistance to MSA leads who are working on the PCAP, and also to the folks within those eligible MSAs who are leading the implementation grant. So two different pieces, right? We've got the PCAP and then we've got the implementation grant. Sometimes those are the same people, sometimes they're different. And we've been providing support to the eligible MSAs that Peter was talking about earlier. And if you want to learn a little bit more about those resources and who those partners are, any of that other information. If you are an MSA lead, I see some of you on here and you haven't heard about this yet or used some of our resources, here's the page for the CPRG Assistance Project, and you can check that out at your convenience. So I think there's just a couple of pieces that I would highlight briefly, because I know we want to leave a lot of time for questions, and for Franz as well, who will speak to the state perspective. MSAs right now are really focused on putting together their PCAPs. So they are putting together all kinds of different measures in there. The PCAPs are sort of this higher level document. It's a bigger plan for a region, and folks are putting together all kinds of things in there, right? It's a very inclusive, far-reaching document. And so there are all kinds of measures in there that will serve as the foundation or the groundwork for future grants and future projects. They're not all going to be what is then in the implementation grant. So if you think of it maybe as like a funnel, right? You've got the PCAP here, which is this big, broader document. And then you've got what folks are going to focus on for the implementation grant, which is then more specific subset of what is in that broader priority climate action plan. And so at the same time that MSA leads are focusing on the PCAPs, we've also got folks focusing on putting these implementation grants together because those grants are due April 1st, a month after the PCAP. So it's a lot for folks to be putting together at the same time. And some of the lead entities for the PCAP are the same as the implementation grant, and some of them are different. So in some cases, you've got, say, an air district or a COG leading the PCAP, and then you've got maybe a coalition of cities or counties leading the implementation grant. And some of that's just about capacity, some of it's about authority to implement, politics, whatever, all kinds of reasons folks are divvying out those responsibilities in different ways. And so the folks who are working on the implementation grants are also working now on finalizing the measures. So what is their grant going to focus on? Are they focusing on transportation, on buildings? Are they trying to decarbonize certain parts of their building sector? What does that look like? Again, everything that Peter just talked about with focusing in on the sectors, other types of funding, who are all of their partners they can be working with on these grants. That's where people are at right now. They're finalizing their partners and they're finalizing their measures. So if you are not already part of an effort and you're within, say, one of those lead MSAs, if you're a jurisdiction that falls within one of those and you want to get involved, then you can reach out to those folks and we can help you sort of figure out what that would look like to see what are they working on. And then the question is, how can you link up with that? How can you contribute to what they're already working on? People are trying to, they're in the sort of final stretch of getting those pieces finalized because this is a big grant to apply for. There's going to be a lot of analysis and paperwork that's going to go into it. So the question will be sort of hooking up into that effort and seeing if or how you can contribute. So that's sort of one path forward. And Franz is going to talk about another path forward on the state side. I think one thing I will say that Peter didn't mention that I think is important is that while technically many cities, counties, and towns are eligible, EPA really has set this competition up to incentivize folks to work together. They've set it up to incentivize multi-jurisdiction and regional collaboration. So it's not set up for a single city to apply and win. It's technically eligible, right? I mean, you could do that, but it's not being set up that way. And so I just want to caution in terms of how folks are thinking about this to really be strategic and think about who are the folks already working on these grants? How can you partner with people? How can you plug into existing efforts? Because it's not like other grant opportunities where they really are set up for single jurisdictions. This is set up for partnerships and it's strongly incentivized. And this is the text that EPA actually has in the NOFO on this part. It's echoed in other parts as well, but this is at the very beginning. So I just want to highlight that because it is quite a heavy lift. And so I just don't want folks to go way down the road thinking I'm going to get all these things together and we have a really good chance at winning because it's going to be, the competition is going to be stiff. So I think that I'll stick with that for my summary. Any initial quick questions before I hand it back over to Jamie and Franz on just the MSA part, any clarifying pieces there?
I think when we get to our bigger discussion with Franz, I'm going to ask Julia to dig a little step deeper and just talk about that coalition piece because
Sure.
I know it's not easy, right, to approach those coalitions and how do you actually do it, right? Like, what does that look like? What does good look like? And so we'll get to that in just a minute. First, I am going to welcome Franz Litz. who is working with the Convener Network on the state's deployment initiative. And that's really seeking to help states develop ambitious PCAPs. We're all now familiar with PCAPs, Priority Climate Action Plans. I hate acronyms, but this is the world we live in, and implementation proposals in states. So Franz, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you, Julia. I hope that this follows nicely on what Julia has to say and gives you sort of the state piece of it and where you might be able to plug into the state piece of it to make good things happen. You can go to the next slide. Just very quickly, these slides will be provided to you. You're welcome to share them with the group, whoever has custody of them, and you can refer to them. The Conveners Network is made up of these 5 organizations, and they cover different parts of the country and have great relationships with states, and in many cases, local governments as well. Next slide. And the States Deployment Initiative is one of several projects that the Conveners Network has underway, and it's focused and organized around the CPRG program. Next slide. And when we launched this back in the spring, after the states signed up to be part of the CPRG program, we set up sector by sector working groups. So you can see the 5 sectors that we delineated here on this slide. And we also planned through consultant help to assist states with matching possible measures, programs, policies, projects to funding opportunities, not just in the CPRG implementation fund, but also other available pots of money federally. And we're also set up to help them with the pieces of the applications that are required, like quantifying the emissions reductions, doing the benefits analyses, and workforce planning. And then, of course, the community and stakeholder engagement is a big piece of this. Next slide. So this shows our near-term arc of activity. We started in Chicago back in June. We're about to meet again in January in Austin. And down along the bottom, you can see what we've been doing. We've been exploring measures together, and we've been crowdsourcing measure ideas. And that crowdsourcing is still open, is my sense, in most states. So you can be part of that crowdsource if you have an idea for a program or a policy or a project that you want to see happen in your city or your other local government. You put that forward to the state, and I'll talk a little bit more about things that might be really helpful to states in this area, and also at the same time helpful to local governments. So we put together a PCAP template that can be available to you if you want to use it. If you're an MSA that is doing a PCAP. And we've also done measure templates that sort of help a state or someone who's thinking about what the measure might be, flesh it out and develop it as a measure that makes it more competitive when it comes time for the implementation application. Next slide. Yeah, so essentially the way we've structured this work is to say, what do you want to do? What kind of programs, policies, projects do you want to see happen in your jurisdiction? Identify those ideas and then develop them out using a measure template. And you can see here in the center, if you have an idea, it's really just a concept. Think about how it impacts the community where it would be implemented. Conceive of a way to administer it. Maybe it's an existing program that doesn't have enough funding. You already know how to administer it. Or maybe it's a new program that you wanted to start and you just haven't had the funds or the resources to get it started. And then, as Julia said, the coalition readiness of it is really important. Is this something that only I do as in my jurisdiction? Or can I recruit other jurisdictions around me? Or in the case of local governments, can I get other local governments in my state to do this? Or my state to administer a program that all local governments could apply to and be part of? And then just think about how much that costs. It has to be something that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and other co-pollutants. So you got to think about coming up with ideas that are going to reduce pollution and have community benefits. So then you just build it all out, and it has to be part of a PCAP that your geography is covered by. So if it's the state and you're in a state, then you're golden. If you're, as everyone has said, if you're inside an MSA, then it could be in the MSA's PCAP. But if it's in the states, then you're covered and you can apply either individually or as part of a coalition. Next slide. And so that's it. I actually, can we go back to this previous slide? Oh, that's all right. I don't need it. One message that I'd love to give to you is that states are very pressed, as all of you are, I know. There's so much coming at you and lots of opportunities to apply for money. That's true at the state level as well. So to the extent you can develop a concept, and I was going to encourage you all to think in terms of concepts and a program that could benefit more than just your local government, that might benefit other local governments in your state. Flesh it out, like put some meat on the framework of that idea, and then approach your state government person and say, put this in your PCAP, and please apply, do this measure, administer this measure so that local governments in my state can apply and access funds and other resources to make this program or project idea happen. And we can talk about some examples of that if you want, but I'll stop there and we can move on to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, both Franz and Julia. That was really helpful, I think, tactical advice. And for all of us to remember, I think sometimes we think about how overwhelmed cities and towns and local government is right now with this sort of deluge of funding opportunities out there. So are the states. And so the more you can approach them in a way where you've already done some of this, thinking and built out something to align with their priorities, the probably better received it will be. So I saw that we had a question in here about first-time applicants. Of course, remember, Julian and Franz are scoring nothing. So that'll really be EPA. That's going to be doing the scoring. So I think here, the question was really about first-time applicants, and I'm guessing here everyone's a first-time applicant, right? Because these are new. But maybe you can just talk to how, if at all, the EPA is trying to think about maybe communities that have been underserved in the past or are energy justice communities, for instance. Is that helpful here?
Yeah, and for the NOFOR scoring criteria, which I'm going to put in the chat right now, here's a link to the NOFO, and you want to go to page 51, and that will give you all the scoring for the implementation grant. It's pretty, there's a lot of wiggle room in it, but it gives you a sense of what they're looking for. And first-time applicants are not one of the criteria. There are points for LIDAC community benefits. There are points for communities that fall within the EPA CGIS screen. There are points for improving air quality. So those are included in there, and you can see sort of, how many points each of those would be. It is primarily focused on GHG reductions, but those are all pieces of it. That section, the LIDAC community benefits is worth 25 points, and some of the air quality pieces are worth, I think, around 10 or something like that. So you can look at more of that in there, but there's nothing for first-time applicants. Franz, is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is they do seem to like the idea of scaling up existing programs or policies. So if there's something that has, X amount of funding and it only gets you so far, but if you had X plus this new amount that you're asking for, you could scale it up and get more reductions. So there, I think there might be a little bend for programs that exist and have a track record. There's also a score for past performance, but that's about the measure itself, not about whether you've applied in the past.
And the other way, yes. And the other way you can potentially look at it is if you're scaling up a program, like Franz was saying, that has worked in one place but hasn't been implemented in other places. That's a way to sort of get in on the first-time applicants or folks who haven't been able to access these kinds of resources or programs in the past. And now you're going to take something that has had success, say, in one of the cities or counties in an area, and then scale it across your region, including lots of folks who haven't been able to benefit before. So that could be something that would be appealing for this program, to Franz's point.
And I think that's such a great point, and it maybe goes a little bit to the federal government caring a lot about feasibility, right? They want to know that whatever they're going to fund is going to actually happen, and it's going to result in the measures that one says it's going to result in. How, if you're a jurisdiction that now wants to get in this game, and you just heard that advice to try to put in place something that has already proven to be successful somewhere else that doesn't exist, how do you figure out what that is? Like, where is there a resource that you can point people to that would say, here's the kinds of projects we're talking about that are, have these proven greenhouse gas reduction benefits, and how to figure out like what you should be trying to borrow from your neighbors?
Do you want to, I mean, well, there are states that have, I come at this from a state perspective, so forgive me, but there are states that have tried to help lift up community ideas. Like New York has a program called Climate Smart Communities, and they bring local governments together with resources that are available at the state level. So you could look to that to see like what are the kinds of things they're promoting in that program. But it's also things just like, I mean, one idea that's come up among the states is how do we deploy solar or solar plus storage in local governments? And could we do a program where local governments apply to a state administered fund and say, I want to install solar, I want backup storage, and I want to make my municipal buildings more resilient in the case of, a weather catastrophe or any other kind of grid failure. So there's an example of something that provides a local service, but also reduces emissions. I would also note, I don't think it's been mentioned, at least not directly, that there's a threshold of $2 million that you have to reach for a project. So, I mean, you might have an idea that's less than $2 million. So the best approach there would be to say, what if the state does it for all of us? We all get to apply for that solar plus storage to power our local emergency services building or, critical services building.
So I think there's been some, oh, sorry, Julia, were you gonna add on that?
No, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, EPA has some examples of possible measures, but the best way to figure it out is to just talk to people around you.
Yeah.
In terms of what's worked, what doesn't work, what do you think? It's just, unfortunately, it's just talk. There's been a lot of meetings as part of this effort.
Yeah. And that I'm gonna put a plug in. We're gonna be linking to a survey shortly to get some help from good folks like Julia and Franz and others to connect with your MSA or state on influencing the PCAP that they're developing, or B, talking some about your implementation grant proposal. And so I'll put a plug in for that. Yes.
I'll also, sorry, Jamie, can I jump in and just to the point, the questions about past performance, they have it as past performance in managing and completing federal or non-federal agreements. So if you've gotten any kind of agreement, they actually, I think in the webinar that Peter was just talking about that they hosted on Tuesday, provided some additional clarification on that. So they are trying to make it a little bit more flexible. You do not have to have pulled down and managed a $50 million federal grant in order to check that box. So there's more information on that, but I just wanted to highlight that's in the NOFO as well. It can also be non-federal.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I think I jumbled that concept with another concept. So thanks for the point.
No, it gets complicated when we start talking about the past performance of the project versus the applicant. Right.
And to
Yeah.
Carol's question too, it's not necessarily novel infrastructure measures. It's interesting. I think Franz and I were on a panel with EPA and some others, and someone asked about that as well. Like, can it, like, should it, we want to do something super innovative, or, and like it can be, but what is innovative or novel in different places is different, right? Everyone's operating within different contexts, different authority to implement, different political, geographical. I mean, you have a lot. It's a huge country, and so there's a lot of leeway for what you can do with these grants as long as they are reducing emissions. That's the main thing to be looking at: reducing emissions and helping LIDAC communities. So it's not necessarily novel per se. Like, there's no standard for what that is exactly.
Right. This is not necessarily an innovation competition. Maybe like, Bloomberg Philanthropies would hope. And so I want to ask about this coalition point. You've both emphasized that you're going to do better, being part of a coalition than going it alone and having your own project. Can you talk a little bit about how cities should go about forming that coalition and figuring out, we've talked a little bit before about those projects are going to have a shared benefit that, are going to actually, reduce greenhouse gas emissions both in their community and in another community. How would you, start forming that coalition and figuring that out?
Yeah, so if you are within an eligible MSA, the easiest thing for you to do is to connect with that MSA. And those folks, lead entities, have sent surveys to folks. They've done email outreach. They've done some meetings. Everyone's approached it a bit differently. So you might have gotten that outreach already, or maybe you missed it. So getting connected with them and getting connected into that effort is the easiest way to move forward if you're within one of those, or to get connected through the state effort. As Franz said, there's a lot of interesting and different ways that states are looking to help all of the locals in their areas. So that's another route. And if you want help getting connected, figuring out like who should I be connecting to and what would that look like, you can fill out this form. If I can just can I put that in the chat, Jamie?
Put in the chat.
That. Cool.
Oh,
you just did.
Yep.
Great.
And I'm going to pull up, because I feel like we're starting to get a little short on time. I'm going to pull up this slide. So Julia and Franz have, in their networks, have made themselves available to help cities and especially smaller towns figure out how to plug in with their MSAs, either to include measures in their PCAP or to collaborate on an implementation grant. So please take advantage of the support that they're offering to do this connective work, because it sounds like it's not just about touching base with your state and saying, I want to include this in your PCAP and I have my own grant, but it's really about getting connected with other municipalities that may also be in touch with them. And so want to just ask one piece of advice, Julia and Franz, you each have for cities maybe that are really just starting to pay attention to this now. It sounds like, Franz, a lot of work has already been happening in the states on their PCAPs. What can a city influence now? What should they be doing?
I think that there's still time in most cases the PCAP is essentially a place for all possible measures to go. So it's kind of like a repository for everything. States are required to coordinate with the local governments in their state. So once you know who to send it to, you should find a welcome person at the other end of the email to take your measure and put it into a PCAP, as long as it includes all the stuff it needs to include. And in theory, they should be working with you already to include the things that you want to see in the PCAP. Then very shortly after, as Julia said, you have to file your implementation grant application. So it just makes sense to think about both of them at the same time. And I was just looking on the evaluation criteria. One of the reasons coalitions make sense is they have a bigger transformative impact. If one local government's going to do something, it may reduce emissions, but it's relatively small. But if you can get 20 or 30 local governments to do the same thing, then you've boosted your transformative impact score. And you can do that two ways as a local government. You could form coalitions, or you can get your state to do a measure that covers all of the local governments in your state. And one of the things we're talking about with states is are there measures that a bunch of states should be doing as a coalition, in a region, like a region that has a lot of low-hanging fruit on heat pump installations, for example. Could all the states in that region do a measure that together that deploys heat pumps? Maybe that's a bad example for local government, but you get the point. So you can have more transformative impact by proposing a measure that helps not just you, but all the other local governments in your state, I think.
Great. And Julia, before you answer, I'm going to launch the poll so everyone can listen, fill out the poll while Julia is answering.
Yeah, I would echo Franz, and I would say, just again, talk to people. And if you are an MSA lead or a lead entity for your MSA's implementation grant, I see some of you on this call, and you want to get connected with some of these templates and resources and you haven't connected with us yet, you can email me. We've been working with Franz's team to adapt their amazing state PCAP template to the MSA. We're going to have a training on that in January. We're going to be, we've got a kind of a prioritization spreadsheet to help with some of this measure kind of prioritization as well. So with aligning it with the NOFO. So definitely I can put my email in the chat. If you guys haven't gotten connected yet, let me know. And then if you are just trying to figure out where are we going, what are we doing, definitely just fill out this form here that Jamie shared with the QR code, and Franz and I can check it out and start pointing you in the right direction.
And we're going to be providing more technical assistance, especially for those communities of under 150,000 through our bootcamp support network. And so stay tuned for more information on how we can plug you in there. I'm just going to quickly promote a session that we're having for all of you transportation folks or grant folks. We're having a session at the Local Infrastructure Hub Technology and Innovation Series next Wednesday at 2 p.m. It's really going to be focusing on the DOT Attain program, and especially just how cities can be using all the different technological advances for their transportation system projects, and how DOT thinks about that when they get applications. And so we really encourage you to register for that one. And as always, our program website, which is localinfrastructurehub.org. I'm going to put it in the chat for about the 10th time. That contains all of our resources. So our calendar, all the slides you have today, the recording. So please do visit frequently, check out the calendar. If you don't already get the insider newsletter, please sign up. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Julia and to Franz and to Peter for their insights today, for being willing to connect well after this session. And I hope that for all of you who I won't see until the new year, that you have a very happy holiday. And Local Infrastructure Hub is here to support you. So reach out, and congratulations to all the communities that won Safe Streets and Roads for All grants yesterday. We're so excited for you all, and share what you're going to be doing, share the enthusiasm, what you're really doing to keep folks safe on your streets. So thank you very much, and have a great night.